Hey everybody, welcome to The Bottom Line. I'm Michael Noland, and tonight finally I get to review and give my assessments on Led Zeppelin's magnificent masterpiece. Yes, I said masterpiece, their album Presence. But first, I just want to give a shout out to all of our new subscribers. Man, I can't believe it. We've had such an increase in channel subscriptions this last week. It's been so incredible, and I want to thank each and every one of you. And as always, at the end of this video, while I'm drawing my final conclusions on this magnificent album, that's where names will start to appear. Brand new subscribers to the channel. Alright, so Presence was released on March 31st, 1976. The album was recorded in the last months of 1975 and pretty much written in that small sliver of time as well. Now, this was a really tumultuous time for the band, right? Robert had been seriously injured in an automobile accident just prior to these recordings. And in later interviews, Robert Plant said that this was a real difficult time for him. He needed time off. He needed time to recuperate, and he didn't feel that Peter Grant, as well as Jimmy Page, they just weren't giving him the time he needed. Jimmy Page evidently really coercing him to meet up in Malibu to help him finish writing these songs. Now, there was a reason why Jimmy needed to do this. He had an opportunity to record this album in some of the best facilities in the world in Germany, but there was only just a sliver of time to really get this album properly written and recorded in time. In fact, in the end, Jimmy had to make a special arrangement with the Rolling Stones, who were scheduled to record their album. So once that deal was made, this gave Jimmy Page about 48 hours to overdub all of the guitar parts that he still had in his head that he needed to get down on tape. And also, with the help of Keith Harwood, his engineer, they scrambled to get basic mixes done along the way. So like I said, Robert Plant was really feeling pressured in order to show up in order to write songs for this album, and even further pressured while in the studio, sometimes delivering his vocals from a wheelchair. All I can say, more power to the man, because he did get the job done. Now, while all of this is occurring with Jimmy and Robert and Peter, with Bonzo, he's pretty much inactive at this point, and John Paul Jones is actually in the background. It's not that he doesn't have things to offer, but he is seriously studying a brand new synthesizer that he would be very prominently displayed on by the very next album, In Through the Outdoor. Now, as I've said, they only had a limited time to record this album. In fact, the entire album was recorded in just a few weeks, the quickest that they had ever recorded an album since their very first two albums. Now, that's interesting because I've always thought this album would fit nicely between Led Zeppelin II and Led Zeppelin III. And you know, there's a real return to the basics here. This album is basically an album of bass, drums, guitar, vocals, and one harmonica. There are no lush orchestrations supplied by John Paul Jones, and as I've stated before, we know why. He was busy elsewhere, kind of educating himself regarding synthesizers. But that doesn't mean this album is a throwback that's sandwiched in between Led Zeppelin II and Led Zeppelin III. It's just the basic approach of writing this album and recording this album, as well as instrumentation. It almost felt like an early Led Zeppelin album. Almost, I say, because some of the time signatures here come right out of physical graffiti, if you ask me. And with Jimmy free to supply all of that symphonic sound around the basic song with his guitars, we really get a treat, especially if you're a Jimmy Page fan, and I am. Now I gotta say, when I first bought this album, day one, it was out, I was at the store early. I was a little taken back by the cover. You see, I was already burnt out on America's craze for the 50s at that point. And at first glance, this album seemed kind of a throwback and kind of leaning on the craze, and I felt at first like I was being pandered to. But then I took it home, and as I listened to these brand new wonderful songs by Led Zeppelin, I started perusing the album artwork, the inner gate, everything, and then I got it. Now the band later said the obelisk that's found all over this album represented the energy or the unknown whatever it was that Led Zeppelin had. And so it was a very personal statement on an album cover by the band. But you know me, I'll read into anything, and when I started looking at these photos, I saw an immediate connection to 2001: A Space Odyssey. Granted, this obelisk with Led Zeppelin's latest album was table-sized, and the obelisk in that film was a lot larger. But I started hearing these songs in a completely different favor just because I misread what Led Zeppelin was trying to actually say. All right, so track one of my very favorite Led Zeppelin songs, Achilles' Last Stand. You know, at 10.5 minutes, this is definitely one of Led Zeppelin's longer pieces, no doubt. And when I first listened to the album, I thought that John Paul Jones was running his bass through some sort of synthesizer or sound effect that I wasn't aware of, and it was later that I found out he actually plays an 8-string alembic bass on this track. And right off, with this song especially, Bonzo lets the listener in on a little secret. He's very dominant on this album, no doubt. He's all over the place on this album, and in my opinion, some of Bonzo's very best drumming with Led Zeppelin ever. But you know, it's at 1:51 into this song, Led Zeppelin lets us know what direction they're going here. The transitions of this song abound. From this point on, the song takes on a majesty it only hinted at in the first couple of minutes of it. And of course, if you've seen any of my videos, you know I feel that this song, this recording, this track is a clear masterpiece by Led Zeppelin. Next up, For Your Life. On first listening to this song, I was again gravitated to Bonzo's magnificent drumming. Now, this song was written by Jimmy and Robert in the studio while they were recording it. And the recording, thanks to a couple of things, really has that almost urgency. And the resultant song imitates that urgency, that let's get it done, let's finish up the lyrics here and record the damn thing. But it's not just that gravitates you toward this song. You see, Jimmy Page is playing a freaking Stratocaster on this track. You know, that warm tone distortion of a Strat, and he takes that sound and manipulates it so well. I wish he had done further recordings on a Strat. I'm a Les Paul man myself, but I've always tried to own a backup Strat. And of course, they're smart enough to use that age-old songwriting trick, change the key when it starts to wear a little thin. And they do this so expertly, you almost don't even notice it. Now, as far as the lyrics go, it's just a nasty little song. No apologies from the band, as usual, and you take it on that level, right? But you know, the lyrics fit so perfect, so wonderfully. It almost has a traditional sound in this song, achieved by only the greatest blues songs and a few of the blues rock artists. as well. All right, so that leads us to track 3, Royal Orleans. This was written as almost a tribute to the Royal Orleans Hotel, an establishment that the band would occasionally hang out at. And you know, this is actually the one track that is actually written by not just Jimmy Page and Robert Plant, but Bonzo as well, and John Paul Jones. This is a group effort and one of the very strongest tracks on this album. Of course, a casual listen won't let you know what the song's about, but when Robert starts mentioning kissing whiskers, you get the idea, right? Again, no apologies from the band, put right in your face for the second time in a row on one of their albums. But you know, that's Led Zeppelin for you. No apologies. You either take them or leave them. But in my opinion, if you leave them, that's a mistake. All right, so that concludes side 1. Side 2 does an interesting thing here. They duplicate the whole approach that they had with side 1 with the very first song. Side 2 opening with another fade-in song, the wonderful Nobody's Fault But Mine. Now, although credited originally to Robert Plant and Jimmy Page, this song was a cover written by Blind Willie Johnson and recorded in 1928. And you know, the song starts off and you immediately get a treat from Bonzo, an almost staggered rhythm that really puts a thumbprint on this song. A magnificent rewrite at the very least. And we even get some mouth harp from Robert Plant on this one. But you know, Robert later told John Bream in his Whole Lotta Love that he basically played the harmonica and sang the vocals on this track through clenched teeth. And that just says a whole lot about Led Zeppelin. You know, even when one of them is absolutely at the edge, ready just to throw in the towel, they still have this magic and that very energy that brings that member that close to the edge actually contributes to a wonderful track. Now, if I have a least favorite song on this album, I'd have to admit it would be Candy Store Rock. Now, Robert Plant later said this was actually one of his favorite tracks. And it's a fine song. I'm just rarely in the mood to listen to Led Zeppelin do 50s rock. As I said, when this album came out, I was totally burnt on that whole 50s fascination by then. But at least we're treated, and for the only time on this album, by the way, John Paul Jones playing keyboards on this track. Now, the song faithfully does create that 50s sound, especially with the slapback delay on the whole band sound there. But to be honest with you, to my ears, it sounds misplaced. It doesn't quite fit on this album. If this song had appeared on their next album, In Through the Outdoor, I might have been a bit more favorably disposed to this song. All right, so it's in the next track that for me, Led Zeppelin returns to the spirit of this album. And man, is this a mean ass track. This is another song that Robert wrote in Malibu, feeling pressured by Jimmy Page and Peter Grant, their manager. And his acid response lyrics are directed right at them. And you know, Jimmy Page again plays Stratocaster on this cut, but you almost feel like he can pick up on what this song is all about. And don't forget the very specific delay he uses on this track. It sounds to me like he got the message and he used that message and mimicked it with the total sound of this song, one of my very favorite Led Zeppelin tracks. All right, so that gets us down to the very last track, T for One. Now, the lyrics are obviously Robert missing home. It's wonderful, a wonderful blues song. But I gotta tell you, this track was misplaced on this album. You know, if you ask me, it should have been sandwiched for a better listening experience between the songs Candy Store Rock and Hots for Nowhere. Now, the reason I say that is most albums always want the last song on the album album to be a powerful reminder to re-listen to that song. Now, this is a magnificent song, don't get me wrong, it's just misplaced on this album. Now don't get me wrong, I understand why they chose to end the album with this song. It was another nearly 10-minute song, and this is an album of bookends, isn't it? You have a 10.5-minute song to open the album, and you have a nearly 10-minute song to end the album. I get it. You have side 1 fade in, you have side 2 fade in. I know what Jimmy was going for here. No, I think the wiser move here would have been to end the album with the excellent Hot's On for Nowhere. That would have invited the listener to turn that album over and listen to the magnificent Achilles' Last Stand. But you know, all of my criticisms of this album are very minor. I consider this album to be a true Led Zeppelin masterpiece. Okay folks, so that's the video for tonight, and my next planned Led Zeppelin video will cover their final studio album while all 4 members were still alive, the excellent In Through the Outdoor. Okay, so that about covers the video for tonight. Again, thank you for watching. I do appreciate it. And for those of you who have been sharing my videos, another great big thank you to each and every one of you. You are the people who are responsible for this channel's amazing growth in such a short time. You know, if you've been thinking of subscribing, it's easy. I know I say this every time, but all you have to do is hit that subscribe to the tribe button and then that top bell notification, and you'll be notified of all my future videos. All right, so I'm Michael Noland. This is The Bottom Line, and I'll see you in my next video.